Well, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Lon, and I also have here Mary McDonald. We we are lawyers here, immigration lawyers here in Canada, and from the law firm of Law Mangoji. And today we are going to be talking about the new express entry system. So the first thing we want to do is to go through what express entry actually looks like, the current system, and then we'll go into what the new system will be on top of that. Take it away, Mary. Yeah.
Right. So I'll start by giving an overview of how express entry works. So express entry, as many of you know, is one of the biggest categories for economic immigration for Canada. And the first step, if you qualify for express entry, is to create an online profile. So you have to qualify under one of the three categories, which are Federal Skilled Worker, Canadian Experience Class, and the Federal Skilled Trade Class. So once you've created a profile, you're a candidate in the pool. But note that this is not the same thing as having applied for PR. You're only a candidate, and your profile will be valid in the pool for 1 year after you enter it. So once you're in the pool, you get a certain number of points through the comprehensive ranking system, which are based on your background and whether you have a PNP nomination. And every 2 weeks or so, the government has a draw where they announce a certain number of points. And if your score is above that number, you can get an invitation to apply or an ITA. So it's only after you get that invitation to apply that you're able to actually apply for permanent residency. Next slide. So let's talk about how to qualify to get into the pool. So as I mentioned, there are three categories. There's the Federal Skilled Worker category. And to qualify for the Federal Skilled Worker category, you need to have 1 year of continuous high-skilled work experience in one occupation. So it doesn't have to be from inside of Canada, but you do need that 1 year of work experience to qualify. You also need to meet minimum language requirements, financial requirements, and then you could potentially qualify for this category. The next category is the Canadian Experience Class. So this class also requires work experience to qualify, but the work experience is very different than the Federal Skilled Worker work experience. So for the Canadian Experience Class, you need 1 year of high-skilled work inside Canada, and it has to have happened while you weren't a student, and you can't use self-employed work experience. So the work experience also has to have been within the last 3 years for it to qualify for the Canadian Experience Class. And then finally, there's the Federal Skilled Trades Class, and this program isn't used as much. So but just generally speaking, in order to qualify, you need to either have an LMIA or a provincial certification for the skilled trades program.
So, Mary, just wanted to clarify, can someone who does not have any work experience in Canada, can they qualify for and get into the pool?
Yes, they can if they are applying under the Federal Skilled Worker class. So they can have 1 year of continuous high-skilled work experience outside of Canada, and they can qualify to get into the pool.
What about if someone only has work experience while they are studying in Canada? Does that count?
That could potentially count if they have 1 year of work experience. If they're studying in Canada, it might be that they don't have full-time work experience. So it has to be the equivalent of 1 year.
Mm-hmm. And so just understand that when you guys, if we put you into the pool, the system itself sorts you out as to whether you qualify for Canadian Experience Class, Federal Skilled Worker Class. Sometimes if you don't enter things in right, they may not put you into the right category, but you don't necessarily yourself select which category per se. You can qualify under two. You can qualify under Skilled Worker Class and Canadian Experience Class. Oftentimes, most people will qualify. If you qualify for Canadian Experience Class, you will also qualify for Federal Skilled Worker Class.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So now that you are in the pool, let's see what you need to do to get the points to get an invitation so that you can get out of the pool. So what gives you those express entry points that we were talking about, the comprehensive ranking score? So the types of things that you get points for are your background information. So that's things like your age. So when you get to your 30s, unfortunately, you do lose about 5 or 6 points each year. And by the time you get to your 40s, you're losing 10 to 11 points each year until you reach age 45, at which point you aren't getting points anymore. So this can be restrictive for older applicants. And if you're under the age of 30, you are getting the full 110 points. For education, that's another thing that can give you points. You get points for the highest level of completed education that you've done. And if you have 2 post-secondary programs and one is at least 3 years long, that can also boost your points for education as well. The next one is language. So this is for scores that you receive on an official language exam. Currently, we are seeing that you need very high language scores to be competitive for getting an invitation to apply through Express Entry. So right now, that's looking at IELTS of 7s in reading, writing, and speaking, and 8s in listening to be competitive right now. The next one is relevant Canadian work experience. So this refers to the kind of work experience that I was explaining for the Canadian experience class. So this is work experience that's high skilled inside Canada for at least a year. You can get extra points for that. Foreign work experience also counts for points. So you can get points for the work experience you gained while working for a foreign company in a high skilled position. Aside from the work experience, you can also get points for your spouse's level of education, language, and Canadian work experience. Sometimes this adds points, but depending on the level of education and language ability, this can also take points away depending on their abilities. Other than that, provincial nomination programs that are express entry linked, which Elizabeth will get into, can give you 600 extra points. So not every program is express entry linked, but some are, and they give you 600 extra points if you are able to get a nomination, which will then get you an invitation to apply. Aside from that, if you've previously studied in Canada, that can add 15 to 30 extra points. If you have arranged employment in Canada, so this is for people who have labor market impact assessments or have an employer-specific work permit, you can get 50 to 200 extra points depending on your position. If you have siblings who are inside Canada and they're over 18 years old and they're Canadian, PRs, or citizens, that can be worth 15 extra points. Fluency in French can add significant points if you can score highly on a French exam. And finally, if you have a trade certification, this can also add points to your CRS score.
Okay, so now you have this background about where the normal express entry system is. So the new category-based selection builds on top of that. Now, I have to say a caveat. We don't know exactly how these draws will work, what the exact numbers are, etc. We haven't had a draw yet. The government has just announced it, and they have said that they anticipate that the first draws will happen this summer. It is already summer, so hopefully it'll happen sometime soon, okay? Now, how do these work according to what the government has said? Well, it's basically going to be layered on top of the current express entry system. So people who are in the pool already, okay, if you belong to one of the selected categories, so there is a French in 2023, the government has said, well, we want to give special preference to people who fall under these categories. They are people who have French proficiency, and then there are people who have select occupations. So how does that work? And then it is anticipated that normal draws for people who don't fall under these categories, they're still going to occur, okay? So just because you don't fall under one of these categories or you're not invited, even during one of those categories based rounds, doesn't mean that you don't have a chance. Normal draws will still occur. However, and we'll talk about this, the numbers are likely to remain quite high, and because of the fact that there are going to be other draws. We will see about that. It's kind of speculation at this point, okay? But let's first talk about these category-based draws. So for the French language proficiency, you have to do the French exam, TEF or TCF exam, and it will be a CLB 7 for each skill level. So we don't care about overall language scores. We care about each one. It has to pass that CLB 7, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, okay? And that's about it. That's not just to say that, okay, I'm very fluent in French and that's it. You still have to, first of all, be in the pool. So you have to qualify, like Mary was saying, under skilled worker, Canadian experience, classical trades. And also the points, the CRS points will likely still have a factor. So what's going to happen is during these draws, the government will say, well, we want to have a certain number of people who qualify who can speak French, for example, okay? And so let's say they invite 1,000 people. Well, then who's going to be invited? If there are 3,000 people who qualify, they're going to be the ones who have the top scores. So your CRS points will still matter, but the CRS points may be lower than the normal draws, because normal draws, let's say they're 480s or 490s. Well, the draws for French speaking probably will be much lower, right? We don't know what it is going to be. It just depends on how many people are in the pool, and they will take the top, however number of people that they want to invite, okay? Similarly, it's going to be with the occupation-based draws. So the occupation-based draws, you do need to have 6 months of continuous work experience in the last 3 years in one of these identified occupations in the following categories. There's a lot of categories. I put the link in here. You guys can check to see whether or not your occupation is there. So 6 months of continuous work experience. Can you use part-time work experience that is equivalent to this? We're not sure. It could be tried and see if they will accept it. But it's full-time, which equals to 30 hours a week. So even if it doesn't matter what your employer says, if they say 30 hours is part-time, that's okay, as long as it's 30 hours a week. I would anticipate that perhaps if we did 1 year of 15 hours a week, that might be okay. But so far, we don't have any specified guidance in that yet, okay? So again, just because you have this work experience does not necessarily mean that you're going to be invited to apply. You still have to qualify to get into the pool. Your CRS points likely will still matter. Will they have different draws for different categories, or will they have one draw for all of these occupation-based draws? Again, not sure exactly. My thinking is likely they will do one for each occupation, so like category, like one for healthcare, one for STEM. It only makes sense that way because the points for example, for people in the trades may be very different for the points for people in STEM. Likely what will happen is I would say it would be for each of the categories, not for each occupation. That would be, too many draws, but I would say probably they would have for each occupation. That's just my speculation. Okay.
Okay, so what do you do if you think you meet the new criteria? So if you meet the criteria that Elizabeth described, there are a few steps that you should take. The first thing you need to do is ensure that you meet the requirements for express entry qualification. So as Elizabeth said, you need to qualify under one of the programs in order to benefit from these category-based draws. So you need to make sure that you have that work experience either inside Canada or outside Canada. You have your language test written, you've had your education assessed if it's outside of Canada, and that you meet the criteria to be in the pool. After that, you need to make sure that your profile is properly submitted. So that means that all the information is correct. You need to check that your language score hasn't expired yet. You need to make sure that you're claiming maximum points. So even if you're qualifying under one of those categories, you still want to have the highest CRS score possible, because as Elizabeth pointed out, they may still have thresholds, and you want to make sure that you're as high as you can possibly be to ensure that you're getting that invitation when they're doing these category-based draws. And then finally, you need to make sure that you have the evidence to prove that you meet the criteria. So when you get that invitation to apply, you will have 60 days to submit your application, and you need to be able to prove using your documentation that you actually qualify for all of those points. So this means records of employment, language results, educational credential assessments, and you want to have those things ready to go before you get your ITA in a lot of cases, because you don't want to miss your chance to apply for permanent residency because you're missing a key document.
Okay, what do you need to do if you don't meet the criteria, or you don't, you may not meet it? So first of all, there are still going to be general draws. Okay, so it's still worth it to look at express entry and see what your potential points might be for the general draws. My thinking, and again, this is speculation, but my thinking is that the numbers for general draws will likely remain around this level that it has been for the last few draws, 480s, 490s, because of the fact that we think that the numbers, when there are other draws, so the government normally has a targeted amount of people that they want to come to Canada. Now, granted, these numbers, the quota has increased a lot in the last few years. So we're looking at around 500,000 a year for permanent residency, and most of them are going to go through express entry. But if they are drawing, let's say they have a target of 6,000 a month to invite, and they're drawing for 3,000 for the category-based one and 3,000 for general, then the number of people in the general will grow, and likely the numbers are going to be still quite high. So what we're going to do is we are going to also talk about some alternatives for permanent residents, like provincial nominee programs, startup visas, RNEP, AIP, etc. Because for those of you who don't have, or maybe your points are not high enough, even for the category-based draws, we need to look at alternatives. Okay, so what are some of these alternatives? So the first one is the provincial nominee programs that are express entry linked. Okay, so if you have a provincial nomination, you don't automatically just get 600 points for express entry. It has to be a provincial nomination that is express entry linked. Okay, now provincial nominee programs are programs that are set up by the province, and the province has an agreement with the federal government to choose people they want to get PR. In Ontario, if you are nominated with the express entry linked, you get 600 points, and you basically are assured that you will be able to get invited to apply. So, like I said, not all programs are express entry linked, and some provinces you can apply directly to the province to get express entry, the 600 points. Other provinces, like Ontario, for example, you can't apply directly to the province. You have to be in the pool and wait for them to invite you to apply. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a rundown for Ontario. Ontario, they have very similar category-based draws to the federal government. So it remains to be seen whether or not they are going to change this, because a lot of people may not be applying to the Ontario-based streams if you can get invited to the federal-based streams. So Ontario right now has tech workers and other chosen occupations, such as, for example, they've done some draws for healthcare, etc. They have one for French speakers. They have one for trade. So if you've been working in Ontario for at least 1 year in the trades, and their underlying CRS score accounts. So it really remains to be seen what Ontario is going to be doing. If they do have these draws, the points may be significantly lower than before, because before, they look at who might be willing to apply, and let's say someone in the 470s, 460s might be willing to apply. Now, if the federal draws go down to 450s, then who's going to apply to Ontario? You don't need the 600 points. You can just apply directly to the federal government. Okay, so we'll see how it goes there.
Okay, and so aside from the express entry linked streams that Elizabeth was describing, there are also non-express entry linked streams. So for the OINP, these programs are totally outside of express entry, and they have different requirements from express entry, so they're worth exploring if you're not qualifying under the express entry or your points aren't competitive. They also do have a different application process. So these streams don't count your age for points. So if you're higher than that 45 years, this could be worth exploring for you. Some of the streams require having a specific type of job offer. Some don't look at your previous education. So in all of those, and some do require job offers and some don't require job offers, which I'll get into in a moment. But these programs all go through a different application process than the express entry application process, which we previously described. There's a few more steps when it comes to the expression of interest system for OINP. You actually have to register for your particular program that you're interested in and get into the OINP pool. Then you get a notification of interest from the province, and you apply for your nomination. And after that point, then you can apply for PR. So it is a different process than the express entry linked streams. And it's important to keep that in mind when you're exploring these options for yourself. And so some of the non-express entry linked streams that we'll just quickly go through are the OINP Masters and PhD streams. So these are for graduates from Ontario institutions who are holding a master's or a PhD degree. And in order to qualify for these streams, you do have to apply within 2 years of graduation from your program. So this means that you have to register your expression of interest, receive an invitation from the province to apply, and apply for that nomination before it's been 2 years. So if you've completed a master's degree or a PhD from Ontario, don't wait around. Register your expression of interest right away as soon as you qualify so that you don't miss your chance for these programs. The other nice thing about these programs is that they don't require a job offer, but you do need to be looking to enter the labor market. So this isn't a program, for example, if you just finished your master's and you're about to apply for your PhD, this wouldn't be a great program for you. You want to be entering the workforce and looking to work ideally in Ontario. I think next slide. Oh, yes. And you need to be selected through the expression of interest system, which is what I described previously, where you're registering for your specific pool through the Ontario online portal. Then there are also OINP employer-based streams. So these are not through express entry as well, and they're based on having a job offer that meets certain requirements, an employer that meets certain requirements, and you as the applicant meeting certain requirements. So for all of these streams, the business that's supporting your application needs to have been in business for 3 years. If it's inside of the GTA, they have to show that their gross income in the last fiscal year was 1 million and that they have 5 full-time Canadian citizens or permanent residents who are employed in the business. If they're outside of the GTA, the gross income needs to have been 500,000. They need to have 3 full-time Canadian citizens or permanent resident employees. And of course, they also need to have been in business for 3 years. And your job offer needs to be full-time and permanent. So permanent means that there's no end date on your contract. This is going to be an ongoing offer for you. So within the employer-based category, there are 3 separate streams. There's the international student stream. So this is for applicants. If you've completed your program of study inside Ontario, you have to apply within 2 years of graduation, and you have to have graduated from an eligible program. So that means that you've done a 2-year program or you've done a 1-year postgraduate program from an eligible school. For people who have done that 1-year program, one of the admission requirements for the program has to have been that a degree was required. So keep that in mind if you're thinking of applying for this program. You also need to have a high-skilled job offer, and you have to be paid at least what's considered the low wage rate for your occupation according to your location of employment. The next stream is the skilled worker stream. So this is another job offer related stream. So for this stream, you need to have had 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years in the same occupation as your job offer. The work experience doesn't need to have been inside Ontario. It just has to have been in the same position within the last 5 years, and you need to have those full 2 years of work experience. It also has to be high skilled. The salary that you're getting offered for this position needs to meet the median wage requirement. And the nice thing about this stream is that it doesn't have any education requirements. So regardless of your education background, you can explore this stream. And then the final stream that we'll talk about for this is in the in-demand stream. So this is a stream that's quite specific. The OINP has a list of occupations that qualify for this program. So it's not just every occupation. Your occupation has to be on a specific list. And it allows for certain low-skilled job offers to qualify for this program. So that can be worth exploring if you're working in what's considered a low-skilled job. If it's on the list, you could explore this. You need to have at least 9 months of work experience in Ontario in the same occupation, but it can have been with a different employer. So, and you also need to ensure that you're being paid the median wage level for your occupation for the salary of the position.
So keep in mind, guys, a lot of these things, it really depends on the person's circumstances as to which one will work for you. Sometimes these applications, for example, will take much longer period of time than the express entry, but just like for processing. But that depends on if you get an invitation to apply for express entry. If you don't get an invitation to apply, long time is better than never. So it really depends on your circumstances. Here are some other programs that you may or may not qualify for. Spousal sponsorships, if you are either married or common law, where you have lived together with one for at least 1 year with a Canadian or permanent resident. Self-employed class for artists and athletes, those people who have been able to support themselves in their art or sport for at least 2 years in the past 5 years, and or you have been participating in world-class events, then and you can show that you will be able to provide the cultural contribution to Canada, or contribution to sports in Canada, you could qualify under this category. The startup visa class is something that we work on with entrepreneurs who want to start businesses in Canada, and you have an innovative idea that you can get the support of an incubator or angel investor. You have to get special approvals from designated organizations. You can, there is the RNIP or AIP. So RNIP is in rural, a lot of the Ontario provinces, some of the other provinces as well out west, or AIP, which is the Atlantic Immigrant Programs. You have to have job offers and community support from that. There are different programs for humanitarian programs for Hong Kong citizens, and also there will be, we just had a conference with the minister where he has affirmed that they are looking into creating a program for Ukrainians as well. So, this is just the tip of the iceberg on a lot of the different programs that can apply. I think it is good news for some people as to the fact that there is going to be category-based draws for express entry. Good news for some, not so good news for others who don't apply because the points are likely going to be higher than, and so what should you do at this point in terms of your situation?
So the first thing that you need to do is have a plan. So you need to think about what routes are open to you and figure out which one you're going to use to apply for PR.
Yeah, so, it's very important that when you seek the advice of someone, you don't have to come to us, but if you wanted to come to us, we're happy to help you. But go to a lawyer who is experienced in immigration law, okay? And if you go to them and they don't know, some of these categories that we're telling you about, they don't have that experience and knowledge. So first of all, go to someone who is experienced, go to someone who is a lawyer, and have that plan as to what you need to do. Once you have, it's not just enough to have one plan too, because we don't know, maybe your points might be enough for express entry, maybe it's not. You should always, in this kind of environment, have a few backup plans as well, okay?
And you also need to make sure that you're taking the steps to do what you need to do to get there. So that means maintaining your status while you're in Canada, finding a high-skilled job if that's what you need, or a job that's going to qualify you for your express entry or for your OINP or for whichever program you're wanting to use. And then you need to also, at this point, with the way points are in most categories, they are competitive. So having those high language scores is a great way to raise your points in express entry, in OINP. And you can write your English or French test. And if you don't score as high as you want, you can write it again, study more. That's one of the best ways to raise your points that's within your control. You can't change how old you are. A lot of the times you have the education that you have, but your language is a great way to improve your score if you need to.
And like I said, retain a lawyer with extensive experience in immigration law to help you. All right, so let's get to our questions. By the way, I put the our contact information on there. If you have come to our webinar, feel free to email us and let us know that you come to our webinar, and we will offer you a discounted rate for the consultations to go over your situation. All right, so Mary, let's start with some questions here.
Right. Okay. So from the Q&A, I have this question. Is the 6 months of continuous work experience for the category draws, does that experience have to be inside of Canada or outside of Canada?
So that is not something that they have said it has to be inside Canada. So if they don't say, then I'm assuming that it can be outside. These categories are for attracting people from outside of country as well to come to Canada and immigrate. So yeah, it doesn't have to be in Canada.
Great. Okay. For the category-based draws, that kind of follows on the last question. Are they only for the federal skilled worker, or does it apply for the Canadian experience class as well?
It applies to anyone who is in the pool. So it doesn't matter how you enter the pool, if it's Canadian experience class or federal skilled worker class, it should apply to anyone in the pool. That being said, maybe sometimes they could say, okay, category-based draw and federal skilled worker class, or category-based draw and Canadian experience class. But from what I would suspect, it won't. It just will be whoever is in the pool, whether or not you come in under FSW or CEC, you're in the pool, your points are as such, and you qualify for the category-based draw.
Great. Okay. And regarding the 6 months of experience, can it be from different employers?
Yes, it doesn't say that it has to be from the same employer. So if it doesn't say, then we take it that it can be from different employers.
Great. Okay, this one is a bit of a situational one. So this person who's asking the question is a student in Canada, and their spouse is on a spousal open work permit who's working in a high skilled position. Could they both create a separate express entry profile?
Yes, you can. And that's an interesting situation. Yes, you can. Now, in the end, if both of you get an ITA, you should just choose one person to submit the application. But technically speaking, each person, you can't, for a person yourself, you can't have two different profiles, but you can, as a couple, each have your own profile. That is possible, yes.
Great. Okay, so somebody's asking for the category-based draws. Do the qualified occupations have to be the primary occupation in the express entry application?
That's a good question. Normally speaking, if it was my client, I would state that it is the primary occupation, except for the situation where, for example, in the federal skilled worker class, the primary occupation, you have to have at least 1 year of work experience in there. So in those cases, we should get some further clarification, but usually in those cases, I would say for federal skilled worker, if someone only qualifies for federal skilled worker, primary occupation should be something that you at least have 1 year of work experience in that.
Great. Okay. For applicants who are working to increase their language scores and they're wondering about whether do you think that these new categories are going to be more temporary or more permanent?
So in terms of how long they're going to stay, for 2023, that's what they've announced this to be. Whether it's or not they're going to be the same for 2024, who knows? They could very well change occupations next year. They could very well take some occupations out of the certain sectors. It really will depend on labor market, their labor market surveys and such.
Great. Okay, so for the category-based draws, do you need to be the principal applicant if you qualify? Or, for example, if somebody's spouse qualifies under the categories, do they need to be the principal applicant?
It will be the principal applicant who they're looking at, because the principal applicant is the person who gets all the points. So, like we had discussed before, if you have a spouse who might qualify under the category-based draws, you could do 2 different profiles for yourself if your points are really high and you might qualify, and you can do another one for your spouse as well.
Right. And we have a question about explaining what the primary occupation means.
So the primary occupation is a question on the profile. It will say, what is your primary occupation? And that's, where we have to say what the primary occupation is. It could be that the system actually just with category-based draws will comb through the system, and it doesn't matter even if you don't put it as your primary occupation, they might still select you for the categories-based draws. That would make sense. I don't know right now because we haven't had a draw and the minister has not exactly put out instructions on this as to whether or not. If someone, it has different occupations and one of those occupations is in the category-based draws, then I would put that as the primary occupation just to be safe.
Someone is asking if they are able to apply in the category-based for the category-based draws if they haven't created a profile and they're not in the pool, if they're a healthcare worker outside of Canada.
You need to be in the pool for them to know that you exist. If you're not there, they don't know you. They don't know that you exist. They don't know that you qualify. They don't know that. So you have to be in the pool in order to be invited.
Right. Okay. Let's see here. So someone has 6 months of continuous work experience and the rest of their requirements are ready. Would you suggest that they start their express entry now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't say for sure a person, maybe there are other circumstances, but with immigration, normally there is, if you qualify for something, normally speaking, you should do it, because if you wait, the rules change so fast that if you wait and you miss your opportunity, you might not get it again. And these draws, we don't know when they're going to happen. We don't know what the numbers are going to be. It could be that the first draw, there's not as many people in there and the points are lower. And then later on, as more and more people around the world get to understand what's happening and they put themselves in, the numbers will be higher. So, I mean, you just don't want to be one of those people who kicks themselves after, oh, if I was in the pool then, I would have been invited. Why didn't I put myself in the pool? So to me, when you put yourself into the pool, you haven't applied for permanent residence. You haven't submitted an application. You're just saying, look, I am eligible and I'm interested in applying. So, of course, there are certain circumstances where someone shouldn't put themselves into the pool. And, that certainly is a discussion. But for the most part, in immigration, if you qualify, apply.
Great. Do you think that personal support workers will qualify for the category-based draws?
If you're, I'll have to double check as to whether or not that occupation is in the healthcare one. You can double check on that link that I put in. I believe I saw nurse's aide in there. I can't remember if I saw personal support worker or not. Now, personal support worker also, the code matters because there are personal support workers that are home support workers, and those will not qualify because they're considered low skilled. So if you're taking care of someone in their home, that would not qualify you for express entry. However, if you are taking care of someone in a nursing facility or in an institution, then that is similar to the nurse's aide occupation, and that you can qualify. So nurse's aide, I know for sure is in there, and I believe the personal support workers where you are working in that sort of facility, I think it may also be in that occupation code, in which case you would qualify.
And we've been asked to just post the link from the slide into the chat. Is that possible? I think I actually have it.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to be sending you guys all of you the slides, so you'll have it with you guys. And I will also Mary, do you have that link on your computer?
Yeah.
We can put it on the chat box, but I'll send these slides to you guys. And we will also send you the link to the video as well, of the recording of this webinar as well. And all of our webinars are posted on the lmlawgroup.com/videos, and you can review and watch our webinars there as well. Okay, awesome. All right, thank you guys all for joining us, and all the best, and hope you guys do well on the next draws. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.